I'm Mr. Sundblad, and I'm going to be teaching you about squaring a board for your woods project. The first step in squaring a board is to measure the length you need and add 1 inch. So since this is going to be a piece for the top of our cabinet, I need a 16-inch finished piece, which means I'm going to mark this one at 17 inches. At this point, I can simply put it up against the fence of the radial arm saw and cut that to length. But if you're feeling less confident about being able to hit your mark, you could use a square and mark a line with the square. Make sure that the tools are pushed out of the way. Make sure you have your safety glasses on. You can line up where you're going to be cutting. And remember with the radial arm saw, this is rough cutting, so it may not hit exactly on our line. We at least want to leave the line so we have enough material for doing the final cut of 16 inches later. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the saw. The next step in squaring a board is to joint one edge. So I'm looking at the board that I'm squaring up here, and my grain is going this way, which means I need to run it through the jointer in this fashion. After jointing that edge, I'm going to mark it with an X. The third step in squaring the board is ripping to width plus 1/8 of an inch. And so if you recall from our earlier discussions, we don't want to glue up stock wider than 4 inches. So since I have a 5.5 inch board, give or take, I could either cut it to 4 and have a little less than 1.5 inches of waste, or I could cut the board about halfway, and that way I can use both halves of the boards. So I'm going to cut this at about 2 9/16, and that should give me 2 boards that I can use for this. I'm also going to make sure that I raise the blade on the saw so that the teeth are above the work about 1/4 inch. So then I'll set the fence to 2 9/16 inches. Put my guard down. Make sure that I put the jointed edge against the fence, and here's where I'm going to make my cut. Jointed board, which we've marked. This is the side that we cut, so we're now going to take at least 1 pass, if not 2 passes, on the other side to make sure that this edge is then 90 degrees and smooth. Fifth step in squaring a board is to cut one end square. We don't really care which end we cut square, but we cannot trust that either end is square right now. Coming from the stock room, probably neither one of these ends is going to be square, or being cut from the radial arm saw, neither end is going to be square. So we always just take a small amount off the end with the miter saw. I'm going to lock down our piece of material so it doesn't slide on us while we're cutting. Being that we just cut this end, we're going to put an X on there to make sure that we don't cut this a second time. Cut this board to 16 3/4 inches. I'll make a mark, and again, if you're not feeling confident in being able to hit that small little mark there, go ahead and use the square and put a line across. I'm going to make sure to to lock this down once more so it doesn't move on me. But I will line up the saw with the blade turned off and make sure that I'm going to be right along the edge of my line. The final step in squaring a board is sanding both faces. Being the board is rough sawn at about 7/8 of an inch, we always set our sander slightly above for the first few passes. And you continue sanding one pass at a time until you bring it down to your required thickness. In the case of our top, we're going to sand this to 3/4 of an inch.